there are guests you interview once, and then there are guests you bring back because conversations stay with you for a long time, even after the microphones were turned off. And Coach Kip Drown is one of those voices. When he joined us last time, he dropped some gems that the parents and players and coaches are still thinking about this very day. So even though he is no longer on the sidelines, he's still watching the game, he's still studying the trends, still monitoring from the sidelines with that same steady, seasoned perspective that only decades in the trenches can produce. So for those that don't know Coach Drown, let me give you a brief information about his background. Coach Drown has built a remarkable career leading programs such as Georgia Southern University, Colorado State Pueblo, Grand Canyon, Georgia Southwestern, and Southwest Baptist. His teams have consistently excelled, earned multiple conference championships, NCAA tournament appearances. He has close to 500 career victories under his name. And listen, beyond the wins and accolades, Coach Drown has been instrumental in shaping young athletes, helping them transition successfully from high school to the college rank. So today, it's not a repeat, it's more of a continuation of a deeper dive, a deeper conversation, and a chance to revisit the game with someone who's seen eras rise, who's seen styles shift, who's seen players evolve. So family, help me welcome back to Recruiting from the Bleachers, Coach Kip Drown.
Michael, it is a pleasure, and I love being here a year ago with you, and I'm honored that you would have me back, and I hope the interview goes as well this time as it did last time. You're so easy to work with, and so it's really a joy to be here.
Thank you so much, Coach. We really appreciate your time, and I know you're enjoying your kind of your semi-retired. Any possibilities of coming back into coaching? I might get some breaking news here.
Well, there's parts of coaching I desperately miss: the teaching, the competitiveness, and then there's some other parts of it that I don't miss as much. So,
Right.
I turned 70 last month. So when you
Okay.
start getting this age, a comeback is not really in your future probably. So I can talk from the sidelines like I know what I'm doing now, and
Yeah.
it's a little easier over here.
That's good. That's good. Well, since the last time you were on the show, Coach, what are some of the changes in the game that have caught your attention as you've been watching college basketball kind of evolve over the last year since we've spoken?
Well, of course, so much of what we talk about nowadays is portal NIL. And they did take steps to try to get the portal under a little bit more control. They shortened down that entry window that the players have, which I think is very helpful to coaches, in terms of trying to put their teams together when they have less, when it doesn't drag out as long. I think one of the things was they made some adjustments to the portal, which I think will be helpful from a coaching standpoint. Part of that was they shortened the portal window down, I think maybe to 15 days. And I got to believe as a coach, that's helpful that you're not stretching that out over 30 days or 45 days. And, they're trying to minimize, I think, the craziness of that period. And then the other thing, they changed the date that you could go into the portal. They put it after the championship game now, which to me is NCAA football still has this problem as far as I know, where they got kids that are jumping into the portal and their team is still in the playoffs. That happened with a Penn State quarterback 2 years ago, and so you don't want to see that. So I think putting the portal back after the championship game is a positive step for the portal. Another thing that caught my attention, now I don't know if it caught a lot of people's attention, Michael, was that the government has some worries. Representatives, senators, they have some worries about the state of college athletics. And there's a lot of people that believe that colleges themselves cannot clean this mess up, particularly NIL. Because
Yeah.
if you look at the SEC and the Big Ten and their television budget, there is no way they're going to let go of that. When I can be at Georgia or Alabama or wherever, and I can go out bid somebody from the Big 12 or the ACC for a player, I'm not going to let you come back and have a salary cap. I'm not going to
Right.
vote for that.
Right.
And so I think the government saying, hey, if you guys can't get this under control, we may have to intervene. And I don't think anybody really wants to see that. But I think there are people that believe that may be the only way that some of this problem gets taken care of, is if there's some kind of regulations put on the colleges in terms of amount of money and things like that can be spent. So, again, it wasn't that they came away from the council with any big revelations, but I think it maybe sent a message that we're watching, and you really need to get your act together on this some, you know?
Yeah.
And then I guess what happened in the last couple of weeks, the expanding of the NCAA tournament, going to 76 teams from 68. I've seen a lot of people not like it because they feel like it waters it down, like they're allowing more mediocrity into the tournament. And then there's the side of me as a coach who also says, yeah, but you're giving 8 more teams on the women's side
Sure.
and 8 more teams on the men's side. You're giving those kids a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. It's not going to expand the tournament length. They're going to play on the same entry days. They're going to have 4 games, I guess, instead of 2, on each of those dates. To me, I don't think it's that big a deal. If I was going to vote, I probably would have voted for it because I know what it's like to get a team in. And sure, they're probably not going to make a lot of damage in the tournament, even though a couple of years ago, UCLA was one of those 4 teams
Yeah.
that played in and made a run, I believe, all the way to the Final Four.
Final four. They sure did.
And so I kind of like it because I think it just gives 80, 100 more kids the opportunity to say, hey, I played in the NCAA tournament. And that's
Right.
really what you want to have.
And coach, that brings up two questions in my mind I'd like to get your input on. Number one, do you think the NCAA, do you think they have the will to make adjustments? Because if the government has to get involved, I would think the NCAA would take would be the lead versus having the government to come in.
In this day and age, I couldn't say yes. I don't think so. I think they've lost a tremendous amount of power. I remember when I was coaching, the NCAA was respected. I mean, their word was final and they set the rules, the standards, boom. And I don't see that. I don't see them having that kind of power nowadays
Yeah.
because if they try to yield that power, players are taking things to court. They've learned that, hey, I've got a recourse to this. And the NCAA hates to go to court and they hate to get beat in court.
Yeah.
And so I really feel like they have tended to go toward the side of the athlete to save from being litigated as much as they have been. So it's really hard for them. Yes, you're right. They ought to be the ones taking control. This should not be a government issue.
Right.
But personally, I don't have faith in them that they've got the power to make those things happen.
Yeah. And my second question on this is, weren't the rules changed? I know you and I talked years ago about you had 5 years to complete four. Was it five? Complete four in 5 years.
Right.
But now didn't they change the rule to say you can do it complete 4 years? What was the rule change there?
Well, you had 5 years to play 4 in.
Right.
But it was 2 different rules for Division I, Division II. Division I, when you signed, they had what you called your clock, and your clock would start. So if you signed, let's say in 2010,
Mm.
your clock would start in 2010 that season, and it would run for 5 years, and you could play 4 of those. So if you took a medical red shirt or whatever, or just a regular red shirt, you could get those 5.
Right.
Well, and they were strict on that. I know one time I had a kid who could not lost that year because they had played like 1 game too many. I mean, they were 20%. If you played more than 20% of the games, you lost that medical redshirt year. But anymore, heck, I saw kids last year playing that were 27, 26. It was their 8th, 9th year of college. And, they were getting medical red shirts on top of each other. Of course, we went through the COVID period that they got that year back. And so they've just completely gone away from this 5 years and 4. And I saw something the other day. I don't know if you heard of this, Michael, that somebody was floating the idea of 5 years to play 5. So you
Yes.
would get
Yes, I
five
heard.
years and you could play 5. You could play 5, but you got 5 to play it in.
Yeah.
And so if you had a medical, that counted in it. And I know the NAIA years ago, they tried to float that idea as a way to be different from the NCAA. It didn't really fly because people wanted to go play in the NCAA, you know.
Right.
But yeah, that's a real problem because we got kids that are going to court saying, "Oh, my junior college years shouldn't count because I didn't get NIL money then."
Right.
And so if I didn't get NIL money, they shouldn't count, and I ought to have the opportunity to make that money back now on the end of it.
A lot of messy stuff going on. How has stepping back from the sidelines changed the way that you see basketball today? Does it give you a better perspective?
Yeah, I think, I look at it a little bit differently maybe. And one of the things I notice now more, I think, is that the interaction between players and coaches during a game seems to me like it's changed. I grew up in the Bobby Knight era where Bobby Knight was liable. You come off the floor and Bobby Knight was liable just to rip into you,
Right.
and a lot of coaches had that mentality. And I don't know if it's because of how quick kids transfer now or what at all, but coaches seem to take a more, I don't know, a kinder approach
Yeah.
to their players,
Yeah.
at least on camera. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody wants to be labeled now as being a Bobby Knight type of coach on the sideline. So I think I've noticed a change in the way coaches interact with players on the floor. From a playing standpoint, yeah, there's a couple things about the game that really bother me now. I just think there's too much dribbling going on in the game. I watch kids come down, and seriously, when kids come down, a lot of times I'm watching the shot clock in the corner because I'll see kids that are going to hit. The shot clock will go for 15 seconds, maybe 20, and nobody else has touched the basketball.
Correct. I've
I
seen that.
I just don't like that. I like people to be moving. I like the ball to be moving. The dribbling is just, to me, has just gotten out of control. Shot selection, we've fallen in love with the 3-point shot. It's just part of the game now. I understand it, and it's a good part. I like it, but I just feel like the people rely on it too much.
Right.
And so the other side of that is I miss to see the really good low post players that had great footwork and could really score inside. And if you brought doubles, they could kick it out to people. And you run your offense a lot of times through those kind of post players.
Right.
And you just don't see a lot of them anymore because those kids, when they grow up, they don't want to be in the post. They want to be
Right.
outside shooting threes, you know?
Threes. Yeah.
And so, and foreign players brought that kind of to America. Foreign players, they want their bigs would step out and shoot. And
Right.
America kind of followed along. So, I miss good low post play. I miss,
Yeah.
I think we shoot too many threes, and I think we dribble too much. But that's just the way the game's gone.
Yeah. And when the three ball is falling, it's great.
Yeah,
It's a lot of fun. You can score quick and you hit four shots and all of a sudden you got 12 points and you're up big. But when it's not going, people look absolutely horrid.
yeah,
It's a lot of times, and I'll watch the NBA, and it's a little difficult to watch because they're coming down court and they're putting up threes so quickly. Everybody's not Steph Curry. Let's go ahead and establish that. Everyone cannot shoot like him, but everyone tries to shoot like him. And it really, to me, it takes away from the game because I remember Phil Jackson in the triangle offense and the
yeah.
strategies behind Krzyzewski and Dean Smith and Bobby Knight, the strategies they had on how to work the ball into the post, bring it back out. I miss that part of the game,
Yeah.
but I know today's athlete has a different mentality, a different mindset. And so are you noticing any shifts in the players' mindset and approach to compare to years ago?
Well, I'm getting older and the players are staying the same, so their maturity level doesn't really change. I
Yeah,
change, and
yeah,
I'm more old school, but I think that players this nowadays, particularly in women's basketball, the maturity of their game has just become so much greater. You know,
mm,
now the emotional maturity of it, a lot of that's seen off the court
yeah,
in things that as a fan or whatever you might not see on the court transferring it to, going back just for a second to what you're talking about with the three, Michael, I'm from the belief that the old saying, "You live by the three, you die by the three,"
oh,
and
absolutely,
and I really believe that. And what really bothers me about that, going back again to how the game's played a little bit, I'm hearing that this, and I'm seeing it too, that a lot of coaches are coaching, hey, either shoot the three or get to the rim,
right,
and there's no mid range game. And a couple of years ago, I was watching the Michael Jordan special that I think ESPN may have done or Netflix or whoever it was. But the thing that really caught my eye was how many of Jordan's points came in the mid-range game.
range,
He had a
yeah,
great pull-up jump shot. And how can you say that what I consider the GOAT of all players, that you don't want players shooting a mid-range jump shot? I mean, that is a weapon, and he was that was a big part of his game. So I don't think, I hate to see them take that away. I hate to say shoot the three, go to the rim, nothing else. Because
yeah.
I think the mid range is important, and I think the low post game is still important if you work it into your system.
Very good point. What challenges, coach, do you think coaches face today that didn't exist during most of your career? What
Yeah.
challenges are coaches facing today?
Well, I got to start off one that has always been, to me, always been the hardest thing about coaching, and that is to develop a team first attitude.
Mm,
I think anytime you take 15 individuals and 15 egos, and now you try to blend them into one, that's hard. I mean, that's really hard. But now coaches today, they got to do it every year. We used to be able to kind of have a process, and we would be able to take kids through as a freshman and grow them and get them to buy in. And nowadays with the portal, I mean, there are teams out there, Michael, and you know this, that are losing their entire roster.
Entire team.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're losing 13, 14 kids. And so now they got to bring 14 kids in June and July, summer school, and try to start creating that chemistry.
Yeah.
And they're doing it year after year after year. And that would have just drove me crazy. And so that's one of the biggest things, I think. Another challenge I think nowadays is coaches have such a small leash in terms of getting fired.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go, heck, in football, if you go 0-4, 0-5, or 1-5, and you're supposed to be pretty good, Auburn will fire you, or somebody else will fire you. And you look back historically. If you look at, say, let's take Coach K and his first years at Duke. Coach K would not have still been at Duke 20 years, 25 years later if he would have started in this day and age. He'd have been run out of there. Bobby Bowden would have been run out at Florida State. I mean, there is no leash. There's no long leash for coaches to build a program anymore. You got to do it now. You got to win immediate, or you're out of there. And that is a real challenge. And I think the third one that I would think of that was just starting kind of to come in as I came to Southern in those last 4 years is the mental health issues that players are dealing with now. I know we probably had them back in the old days, but I think it was just we didn't recognize it, and players didn't, they just, I guess, kept it inside of them. But I know when I got to Southern, and it wasn't just Southern, it was all rampant across, particularly D1, started out there. But the issues that kids were dealing with pressures and all the things that were going on, we used as coaches, if we felt like a kid was having a problem, we could take them and deal with it and talk to them and see if we could help. Nowadays, if a kid has a mental issue problem, they take the coach out of the equation. They would what they call red card them, and they take the coach out, and now they deal with the trainer, they deal with a sports psychologist or whoever. And if the player wants to come and talk to you about it, they could. But again, now this was 4 years ago or so maybe they made some adjustments. But you couldn't go to the player and say, because they would pull them out of practice, and you couldn't go to them and say, hey, can I help with anything? And to me, that's one of the reasons I got into coaching. Was I wanted to help kids grow. I wanted to see them become a better player, but I wanted to see them, graduate. I wanted to see them grow as a person.
Right.
Part of that was the emotional part and the mental part. And I felt like they took that away from us as coaches, and it really handcuffed us in terms of how much time we could spend with them off the court trying to help them deal with the problems that they were dealing with. And so, that's a real challenge I think coaches face nowadays.
That wraps up another episode of Recruiting from the Bleachers. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and I appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to join us next week for another insightful conversation. Stay connected with us on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube at Recruiting from the Bleachers. Like, share, and follow to keep up with the latest updates. And don't hesitate to leave your comments and questions. We'd love to hear from you. For a deeper dive into the basketball recruiting process, check out our book, Basketball Recruiting, A Parent's Perspective, available now on Amazon.com. Parents, remember, from the bleachers to the big leagues to the boardroom, let's keep cheering and steering our student athletes towards success. We'll see you next time.